Sin as control, who invented it, and why you never questioned it. Hidden truth about sin, invention of sin, church and guilt, religious control, spiritual manipulation. What if the concept of sin wasn't divine, but designed to control you? Have you ever wondered why the idea of sin focuses more on obedience than on understanding? In ancient times, before institutional religion took over, cultures saw human error as part of growth, not as a moral crime. But as power shifted into the hands of empires and clergy, sin was reframed. No longer a path to reflection, but a tool to create shame. You were born guilty, taught to fear desire, and made to believe you needed a middleman to reach the divine. Why? Because shame is easy to sell, and fear is easy to manage. So now ask yourself, was sin given to you by God, or by those who wanted to be God over you? Comment your truth. What's the earliest sin you were taught to fear? Like if you're ready to question what you were never allowed to doubt. Share if this message needs to break someone else's silence. Save to revisit the moment your mind cracked open. In part 2, we'll expose how early spiritual traditions had no concept of sin, only balance, energy, and intention. Before sin, how ancient spiritual traditions saw good and evil, ancient spirituality and sin. Before sin existed, energy and intention, good and evil origins, spiritual balance teachings. What if your soul wasn't broken by birth, but already whole? Long before sin was a doctrine, ancient traditions taught something radically different. In Egyptian Ma'at, morality was about balance. In Hindu Dharma, your actions were measured by intention, not obedience. And in Taoist philosophy, nothing was purely good or evil, just aligned or unaligned with nature. There were no eternal punishments, no inherited guilt, no divine scorekeeper tallying your failures. Instead of sin, they spoke of energy, karma, harmony. You weren't punished for your urges. You were taught to understand them. You weren't labeled bad. You were guided back to balance. So why did we abandon these systems and replace them with fear? Comment your insight. Do you think morality without fear could make us more conscious? Like if this expanded your perspective. Share if someone in your life needs to hear this. Save to return to this deeper truth when the world gets noisy. In part 3, we'll reveal how the early church rewrote history, turning mystical experiences into heresy and labeling empowerment as rebellion. From mysticism to heresy, how the church redefined spiritual power as sin, church versus mysticism, spiritual empowerment, heresy history, forbidden spiritual knowledge, sin as rebellion. What if the path to the divine was always within you, but someone built walls around it? In early spiritual movements, mystics experienced the divine directly, through meditation, dreams, nature, and altered states. They didn't need a priest. They didn't need a church. They just needed awareness. But this scared those in power. Mystical experiences became labeled as heresy. Empowerment was reframed as pride, and questioning authority became the ultimate sin. The church rewrote spiritual history, dismissing intuition as dangerous and branding seekers as rebels. Why? Because people who know their inner truth can't be manipulated by outer systems. So sin evolved from natural missteps to spiritual censorship. Comment: have you ever felt punished for simply trusting your own truth? Like if this part hit deep. Share if someone you know was told their light was darkness. Save to remember, the path to the divine was never supposed to be blocked. In part 4, we'll uncover how the concept of original sin was invented and how it reshaped humanity's self-worth for centuries. Original sin wasn't original, the invented doctrine that shaped human shame. Original sin history, church control shame, invention of guilt, fall of man doctrine, psychological manipulation religion. What if the most damaging idea in your life was a lie written into your soul? The concept of original sin doesn't exist in Judaism. It wasn't part of early Christianity either. So where did it come from? It was invented centuries after Christ by theologians like Augustine, who reinterpreted the Adam and Eve story as a cosmic failure passed down to every human being. Suddenly, you weren't just imperfect, you were inherently broken. Sin wasn't something you did, it was something you were. This gave the church enormous power. They offered salvation from the disease they defined. It changed the way you saw yourself. Your body became a battleground. Your desires became proof of your guilt. But what if the garden wasn't about a fall, but an awakening? What if you were never meant to feel ashamed of being human? Comment your take. Do you believe humanity is inherently flawed, or just deeply misunderstood? Like if this cracked open your beliefs. Share if someone you know needs to be freed from inherited guilt. Save to come back the next time you feel unworthy. In Part 5, we'll explore how sin was made gendered, used to shame women, control bodies, and silence feminine power. Sin and the silencing of women. How the church used guilt to control the feminine. Sin and women. Religious shame control. Feminine power suppression. Church patriarchy guilt. Body and sin doctrine. Why is the first sin ever told? A woman's curiosity. From Eve biting the fruit to Mary Magdalene being rewritten as a prostitute, women have been linked to sin in every chapter of institutional religion. It wasn't just storytelling, it was strategic. By blaming Eve for the fall, the church painted women as dangerous, desire as deadly, and the body as a trap. Female sexuality became proof of guilt. Spiritual wisdom in women was labeled witchcraft, and feminine leadership silenced for centuries. But in ancient spiritual traditions, women were priestesses, oracles, healers, goddesses. Their power wasn't feared, it was honored. So ask yourself, was sin about morality or maintaining power over half the population? Comment your truth. How has shame shaped your view of your own body or voice, like if you're reclaiming the divine feminine? Share if someone needs to know their power was never sinful. Save to keep this healing message close. In Part 6, we'll expose how religious sin narratives demonize pleasure, turning natural joy into spiritual fear. Pleasure as a sin. Why religion made joy something to fear. Pleasure and sin. Religious fear of joy. Church against desire. Body shame doctrines. Spiritual repression history. Why is it easier to feel guilt after joy than peace? From food to intimacy, from dancing to dreaming, religion often told us, if it feels good, it's probably sinful. Desire became dangerous. The body became suspicious. Joy became a test, not a blessing. But why? Because pleasure connects you to your body, and a person rooted in their body is harder to control. So the church rewrote the script. Discipline was holy, suffering was spiritual, and happiness, a temptation. But look deeper into older traditions, from Tantra to Native American rituals, and you'll find that pleasure was sacred, a path to presence, connection, and even the divine. So ask yourself, was pleasure ever the problem, or was it your power? Comment. What form of joy have you been taught to mistrust? Like if this helped you feel less guilty for being human. Share with someone raised to fear their own happiness. Save to remind yourself that joy is not a sin. In Part 7, we'll explore how guilt was systemically installed through rituals, how the repetition of shame became spiritual programming. Programmed to feel guilty, how rituals turned sin into a mental pattern. Guilt programming religion, sin and mental control, religious ritual shame, spiritual indoctrination, repetitive guilt belief. How many times did they have to say it before you believed you were broken? From childhood confessions to weekly repentance, from kneeling in shame to repeating I am not worthy, you weren't just taught about sin, you were trained to feel it. Rituals weren't just spiritual acts, they were systems of internal programming. Over time, guilt became automatic. Even without doing anything wrong, you felt wrong. Every thought was questioned, every desire suspected, every joy dimmed by doubt. This isn't faith, it's behavioral conditioning, but you can unlearn it. Because beneath the guilt, there's a self untouched, not guilty, but aware. Ask yourself, if guilt was taught through repetition, what would happen if you repeated love instead? Comment your moment. When did you realize your guilt wasn't truly yours? Like if this hit where doctrine couldn't reach. Share to start breaking the cycle for someone else. Save to reclaim your original, untamed self. In Part 8, we reveal how forgiveness was sold as a product and how spiritual freedom was made transactional. Selling forgiveness, how the church turned redemption into a business. Church and forgiveness. Selling redemption. Spiritual manipulation. Indulgence history. Transactional salvation. When did forgiveness stop being a gift and start becoming a transaction? In the early church, redemption wasn't free. It was something you paid for. They called them indulgences, money exchanged for mercy, donations in return for divine pardon. You could buy forgiveness. You could buy salvation. You could even buy your dead relative's way into heaven. But this wasn't about God. It was about control and currency. The more guilty you felt, the more you paid. The more you doubted yourself, the more you depended on them. Forgiveness became a spiritual product, administered by priests, priced by systems. But real forgiveness, it doesn't come from a transaction. It comes from awareness, truth, and self-healing. So ask yourself, who benefits when you're taught you can't be free without paying for it? Comment below. What's the first belief you were sold in the name of God? Like if you're reclaiming the right to forgive yourself. Share if someone you know still thinks they need permission to be whole. Save to remind yourself that freedom was never for sale. In Part 9, we'll go even deeper into how sin became a system that fuels religious, political, and psychological control. Sin as a system, how guilt fuels religion, politics, and psychological control. Sin as system, guilt and religion, psychological control doctrine, political manipulation religion, engineered guilt belief. What if sin wasn't just a belief, but a system designed to govern your soul? Look deeper, and you'll see it everywhere. Religious leaders use guilt to control behavior. Politicians use morality to sway votes. Corporations market to your shame, then sell you the cure. And it all starts with the idea that you are not enough. This system keeps you in a cycle. Shame, submission, purchase, repeat. You obey spiritual leaders, vote for moral saviors, and buy products that promise to fix what was never broken. It's not just theology, it's psychological programming, because a free mind can't be managed. So the concept of sin was woven into education, media, law, and culture. It became a silent algorithm guiding how you see yourself and what you think you're allowed to be. But here's the truth. Guilt doesn't make you moral. It makes you manageable. Comment your awareness. Where have you seen guilt used as a tool to control? Like if this helped you step outside the system. Share to free others still trapped in the loop. Save if you're ready to rewrite your internal code. In Part 10, the final chapter, we'll tear the system down, reclaiming sin as a myth and restoring your inner sovereignty. Sin is a myth, reclaiming your soul from centuries of shame and control. Sin is a myth, reclaiming soul from shame, spiritual freedom from guilt, religious deprogramming, breaking guilt narrative. What if you were never broken, just told you were? What if your pain wasn't punishment, but a portal? What if sin was never divine, but a narrative written by men to keep you from trusting your own light? You were born with intuition, with knowing, with a sacred connection to something bigger than any book or priest could define. But systems needed obedience, so they fed you fear. They painted your soul in shame until you forgot how to feel your own worth. But here's the truth. You are not a sinner. You are not guilty. You are not broken. You are becoming. This isn't rebellion. This is remembrance. It's time to walk away from borrowed guilt and walk back into your own soul. So comment now. What belief are you ready to let go of for good? Like if this was the moment you remembered yourself. Share to help someone else reclaim their light. Save if you're done living by fear and ready to live by truth. And if this series changed something inside you, subscribe, because this is just the beginning.